Everything that anyone can ever tell you about real estate falls under that sentence. Know what stuff's worth, outpace the competition. That's it. You know, if you don't know the values in your area, how are you going to know if something's a good deal or not? You know, there's an old saying that money is made when the value is known, money is lost when the value is unknown. You know, point being is like, if you don't know what something's worth, you won't be able to tell if it's a good deal or not. If you do know the values in your area, you will instantly be able to identify an asset selling for less than the market. And you'll be able to say, hey, that's it. That, you know, everything else sells at this, and it's worth this, and this individual, for whatever reason, is selling it at this. That's a great price. Now that we have that skill set and we know our values in the market, all we got to do is just rinse and repeat faster than anybody else. Just look at more deals than the next person and you win. It's very simple, but that's everything anybody can ever tell you about real estate fits under one of those two things. You know what things are worth, work harder than your competition.
Hi, and welcome to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast. Hey, welcome back. I'm your host, Jacob Ayers. I'm really excited for today's topic. That is creative seller financing. Now, this is one of my favorite topics to discuss. And when you're talking about this, there is possibly no one better that knows the subject than today's guest, Bill Ham. He's a commercial airline pilot turned real estate investor, got his start buying a duplex and has scaled and grown his portfolio. He bought his first 400 units without ever stepping foot in the bank. He's an author of Creative Cash, that is. Welcome to the show, Bill Ham.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. Well, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got your start in this real estate world.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, besides the great intro, I think you covered most of it. I've been in the business about 16 years now. So I was a pilot by trade, flying airplanes, and walked away from the aviation career in 2005. My very first deal was a duplex. I'd saved up about $10,000. It's cash flowing about $300 a month. And I said, you know what? I'm smarter than the average bear. So I quit. I walked away from aviation and just went into real estate. Found out very quickly I was not smart as I thought I was, but did survive it, did make some money, did lose some money, learned a lot. And I'm still here 16 years later. I've built a management company. I've had a portfolio of over 1,000 units. As you mentioned, the first 400 units I was able to complete with some form of creative financing. It was either lease options, seller financing, credit cards, line of credit, you name it. I wound up doing it early on. And then ultimately started getting into larger commercial assets. And now I am largely a syndicator. So I syndicate most of my deals, bringing in limited partners and putting deals together. So that's pretty much how I got here.
I want to get into all the creative seller financing methods and your background there. But first, kind of talk about the mindset of leaving that high-paying W-2 career that you spent, I'm sure, years and years, studying to be a pilot and becoming a pilot and building your career. And you decide to walk away from that, quote unquote, and become a real estate investor.
Yeah, I hear you. You know, the mindset, that's an interesting question. What I figured out was that I was relatively lazy and relatively ADD, which is probably relatively normal for most people, right? And so what I had to figure out was a way to sort of force myself to get out of the comfort zone. And so I spent about a year studying, reading books, just doing your normal stuff, gathering information, and then ultimately closed that very first deal, which was a duplex. And the mindset that I realized was going on was that every time something would be a little bit risky, maybe a little bit work, or maybe a little nervous or taking action, I would always run back to the job. Right. So I realized I had to figure out what was this bridge that I was crossing back into the safe zone every time things got, made me uncomfortable. And so I figured out it was the job. And so I had to burn that bridge and, let that shine the way forward. So that's kind of the lesson that I took away from that I might share with other people is there's something that you're always going back to, that's some sort of comfort zone. You got to figure out what it is. You got to figure out what your path back to it is and destroy the path. You don't want to go all the way out into what I call your shock zone, which is kind of like some kind of crash diet or crazy exercise program, New Year's resolution we never keep. You don't want to go all the way out there like that, but you got to figure out what the comfort zone is, and you got to stay out of that. So somewhere between your comfort zone and your shock zone is where you got to live.
I love it. I love it. So you buy this first duplex while you're still working full-time airline pilot. You save up $10,000. It's cash flowing $300 a month. That's a pretty good deal. You're probably thinking, hey, this real estate thing is pretty awesome. I'm going to do this thing again, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But you've saved up all your cash and you've invested it. So you've got to figure out how to either wait until you save up another 10 grand or you got to get creative.
That was it. I had no money, no credibility, no experience, didn't know what in the heck I was doing, did not come from a family of real estate or business people. My family were in positions largely. So, I did not come with any kind of background for any of this. And what I discovered is really the core concept in the book, Creative Cash. And it's the one thing that I want everybody listening to take away. And it's that you need to create value for the seller. You need to be a problem solver. And if you can learn the art of problem solving, it unlocks most doors. So all of the problems I had, no money, no credibility, no experience, none of this kind of stuff. Oh, by the way, I was also in Macon, Georgia, which is about an hour and a half south of Atlanta. In 2008, that city was listed as the number 8 most impoverished city in America. So a very difficult market, 100-year recession, all these different things going against me. But I solved all those problems by creating value for sellers by solving seller problems. And that's really the core of that book, is how to go out and get deals by being creative and using that creativity to solve problems. And so that's how I got started. Really, that's the real answer, is I just got out there and made it up. Whatever the seller needed done, I got in there and did it, figured it out, made it up, created an offer that helped me, helped them. And that's how. And
there are no rules, no boundaries, no limits to how creative you can be, right? There's no bank or lender or rule book or title company or whatever telling you that you can't do X, Y, or Z. It's just
right.
As far as
you do anything illegal, it's wide open, isn't it? I mean, there's really no rules to any of that. There are some tricks and techniques we can certainly use, but every situation is different. Every deal is different. Every seller is different. And it's not a one size fits all scenario. You've got to be able to analyze each scenario, the deal, the person, the market, the neighborhood, all of it, and create a problem solving offer.
So if you're going to solve
you do it.
If you're going to solve a problem, you have to first be able to identify that problem, right? So what are some problems that you can see right off the bat that you're like, hey, I know how to solve that problem, or this is another common problem?
How long do you have? You got a day or two worth of all the problems I go through. My favorite, we'll start with my favorite, burned out landlord. Just someone who the real estate itself is not necessarily in bad shape or in a bad area. It's a personal problem with the seller. They're tired. They don't want to manage. They thought they were smarter than the average bear and found out they were wrong. A lot of professionals, white collar professionals, find themselves in this situation. They think, oh, property management, that's easy. I can go out and buy this 10 unit, 20 unit. I'll manage it myself, no problem. And they realize being a landlord is a lot more time consuming than they realized. And now they're getting burned out and they just don't want to deal with this thing anymore. That's my favorite problem to solve, because that means the real estate's in good shape. It's just a personal issue with the seller. Lease option, master lease option, great scenario for that one. My second favorite would be the seller has probably run out of money. They wanted to renovate the property, or the property has fallen into disrepair, and for whatever reason, this seller doesn't have enough cash to go in and finish the repairs or finish out the business model. That's also a really good one. You can get into those deals for a little bit of renovation money sometimes, seller financing, things of that nature. So there's tons and tons and tons. One, and I'll give you a future one that's coming, that it's not here right now.
Okay.
Getting out of agency debt. Fannie and Freddie loans. Now, this is something that I have found in the commercial multifamily space. The majority of people over the last 2 or 3 years, in my opinion, they went out and got agency debt, Fannie and Freddie, are not as versed in one little word as they should be, defeasance. It's a fancy way of saying prepayment penalty. Those agency loans, they're low interest rate, and that's great, and they're long-term and they're fixed and all these attractive aspects to them, but people don't realize they come with a really big prepayment penalty. And so I've seen a lot of people get into deals that I don't think they quite understood when they got in. The market was great, everybody was doing it, and they kind of rushed into some of these deals. And now they're in a loan they can't get out of. If that property, has a little distress to it, maybe the tenants aren't paying, COVID, we've seen that, certain things of that nature, they're not going to be able to get out of that loan. You can assume the mortgage, but people tend to offer a discount when they have to assume someone else's mortgage. So that's kind of one of the areas I'm predicting that we're going to see a lot of creativity in. You're going to be able to come in and do master lease options and things like that with people who have debt they can't exit. So that's something you want to watch.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Something to think about there. And then possibly, maybe they had these loans 3 or 4 or 5 years ago originated then when interest rates were a little higher than they are now, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So even assuming the mortgage isn't attractive, because you could go get new debt today at a lower interest rate than assuming this mortgage would be. And that's where and plus maybe disrepair to the property. Those are areas that I think are going to be rife for opportunity with creative financing. So I would tell everybody here is if you're looking at a deal and they've got long-term debt on it, keep an eye on that deal. They may find themselves in a situation they become motivated.
Do you think that's going to be a quote unquote transitory issue, or is that going to be a bit of a longer term issue? Like maybe an issue
everything is transitory. Everything is market cycles. So that's something else I teach and I talk about in the book is market cycles, understanding the rise and the fall of each market cycle. So nothing is forever. Everything shifts and changes. And that's one thing you got to really pay attention to as an entrepreneur. Forget real estate, forget being an investor. As a business owner, you've got to pay attention to the market cycles and to the future of the market and what's going on so that you can adjust your strategies so that you don't make money when everybody makes money and then turn around and lose it when the market's not up. If you only make money when the market's good, you're not going to last but maybe 6-7 years in the business, because then you're going to have a shift in the market and you're going to keep doing the exact same thing, not change your strategy. All of a sudden it doesn't work and you wind up losing most of what you made. I have had it happen to me and seen it happen to a lot of people. So you got to learn how to change your strategies along with the market cycles.
Bill, to someone who's never heard the term creative seller financing, it might sound a little mysterious, a little mystique. What's it mean to you?
Well, it's just a way of wrapping up all creative financing in one sort of term, CSF, right? Creative and seller financing is maybe the way we could say that, right? But it's just a term that I kind of created to generalize all creative financing. So it could be a master lease option, seller financing, sort of equity position, buying out someone else's equity. There's tons and tons of ways to do it.
Give us an example of how you maybe implemented creative financing early on in one of those, maybe first of the several deals you bought without ever stepping foot in the bank.
The very first deal I ever did, that duplex, 100% seller financing.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
From a friend, actually. Now, I got lucky. So I'm not saying that going out and getting 100% seller financing is something that's going to occur very often. It's not. But it was a friend of mine. I was lucky. He gave me financing for enough time, the seasoning period, which means how long you have to own a property before you can refinance at the bank and refinance off of the new appraisal, not the original purchase price.
Yeah, right.
The seasoning period. Now, back in the old days of real estate, back in 2005, that seasoning period could be as low as say 90 to 180 days from purchase to refinance. Today, it's typically about a year to maybe 18 months before you can refinance and the bank ignores the original purchase.
That kind of is bank dependent, right?
It is. It's lender and bank dependent. There's no law there. I'm just saying rule of thumb, you should not be expecting to refinance something in 90 days and pull all your money out. It's probably gonna be a year to 18 months. Back then, I was able to refinance within 90 days. And so all I had to do, there was nothing to pull out. All I had to do was refinance and pay off the seller financing. And I was able to do that. And so that was my very first deal. There was seller financing after that and some other deals, lease options. I started doing master lease options.
Explain a master lease option, if you will.
Yeah, there's no difference between a lease option and a master lease option except number of units. So if anybody's in single family or you've heard of a rent to own or lease option, it's the same thing, except when we're talking about multiple units, we just call it master lease option. That's the only difference.
Okay.
What it is a rent to own. So Jacob, I'll use you an example. Let's say you have a property for sale and for some reason you're a burned out landlord. You just don't want to deal with it anymore. It's 100 units, and I come in and I say, okay, Jacob, I'll take over with a master lease option. It's two separate contracts. All right. The master lease allows me to rent the property from you with the right to sublet to the tenants. All right, so I just rented your 100-unit apartment complex. I'm now renting it out to the tenants. That makes me the operator, the manager. I'm now in control of the property. I'm also in control of the cash flow. All right, second document is our option to purchase. You and I are going to come up with a price today based on the market and the property value today. All right, once we agree to that price, we'll just say $1 million for conversation's sake. You and I have agreed this property is going to sell for $1 million. All right. Now I have the option to buy that property for $1 million for X amount of time. And we would obviously agree on how long this time is. Typically 1 to 3 years, something like that's pretty normal. So, let's just say that you and I have agreed to buy, I can buy the property for between today and the next 3 years for $1 million. Under the lease, what I want to do is to be able to go in there and straighten out the operations, do whatever it was you didn't or couldn't do operationally. Now I've got the property up and running. It's doing much better. It's cash flowing. The value, hopefully, has gone over the $1 million option price. So now let's say the property's worth $2 million. I still have the right to buy it from you at $1 million. And so that's roughly what a master lease option is. One thing you got to pay attention to here is that, or two things really, you're a renter, not an owner. So as a renter, there is no refinance out of a master lease option. So don't think, hey, I'll get Jacob's property under contract for $1 million and then it'll be worth $2 million and I'll go borrow 80% of 2 million and refinance and pull all this money out. No, that's not how a master lease option works. You still have to buy the property. So when I exercise my option to purchase, I'm actually buying the property. So I am buying a property that's worth $2 million for $1 million, but I am still going to have to put down 20% on that million. So that's roughly how a lease option works. Now, if you want to do a refinance, that would be seller financing. That's different.
Yeah, right. And in some states, they call things a little bit differently. Sometimes in like different regions, you hear it rent to own, you hear it lease option. Yeah. So it's just all those kind of terms wrapped into one. But
yeah, as long as you're business to business, LLC to LLC, investor to investor, there's really not many laws around this. When you start doing stuff like this for a home owner, that's where you can get into legality. I don't know the law and I don't want to quote the law, but I think you can only do several before you become considered a lender. So pay attention if you're doing sort of lease to own to end users. I believe there's some law there you want to kind of pay attention to. Business to business, it's pretty wide open.
Bill, I want to read an excerpt from your book and get your opinion on it. It's just real short, but sure. I think it's very first sentence in the introduction. It says, I can tell you everything you need to know in order to build a successful real estate business in one sentence. Here it is. Know the values of the assets in your market and analyze more deals than anyone else. I absolutely loved that. Can you kind of expand on it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you stop and think about it. Everything that anyone can ever tell you about real estate falls under that sentence. Know what stuff's worth, outpace the competition. That's it. If you don't know the values in your area, how are you going to know if something's a good deal or not? There's an old saying, money is made when the value is known. Money is lost when the value is unknown. Exactly. Now, I didn't make that up, but point being is like, if you don't know what something's worth, you won't be able to tell if it's a good deal or not. If you do know the values in your area, you will instantly be able to identify an asset selling for less than the market. And you'll be able to say, hey, that's it. That everything else sells at this, and it's worth this, and this individual, for whatever reason, is selling it at this. That's a great price. Now that we have that skill set and we know our values in the market, all we got to do is just rinse and repeat faster than anybody else. Just look at more deals than the next person and you win. It's very simple, but that's everything anybody can ever tell you about real estate fits under one of those two things. You know what things are worth, work harder than your competition. That's it.
When you're analyzing these deals and looking at the market and you're trying to figure out where are prime and ripe opportunities to implement creative financing, you kind of mentioned a few typical problems from the seller's end. How about from the property end? Are these going to be more distressed properties? Are these your Class A high-rise apartment buildings? Or, what are the kind of prime opportunities you've seen right for this?
Typically. All right, well, let's go this route. First off, it has to do with the seller. The seller, like I tell people, a good deal is 90% seller, 10% real estate. You can have the best deal in the whole wide world, real estate wise, and if the seller's not willing to do business, you've got nothing, right? So it really starts with that seller. So creative financing is going to come in when a seller has a need that you can solve, or has a problem that you can solve with a creative offer. All right, so we got to start and say, why would a seller have problems? Usually it's the property. I would say 30-40% of the time, maybe it's on a personal level. As I said earlier, they're a burned out landlord. They're tired. They don't want to deal with it. They need maybe money or cash flow or who knows whatever. So sometimes it's the seller, but I would say a good 60-70% of the time, the seller's problems are based on the property.
Yeah, or if the property reflects the problem, right?
Correct. The property is the problem. Yeah, usually. Like I said, sometimes it can be personal, but yeah, usually it stems from the property. Aging asset is one. As a property gets older and there's capital expense needs, maybe the seller, what I find a lot of times, has sort of over leveraged. They bought high. It's an older building. They really didn't calculate the expenses that are the capital expense needs coming, and they've collected all the cash flow, but they've ignored the infrastructure of the property. And so now there's $100,000, $200,000 worth of work that needs to be done on this property, and there's no money laying around to do it. The property cash flows, but not 200 grand a month, and all of a sudden you've got a big plumbing problem, a big roof problem. The city has said, hey, you need to fix X, Y, Z, so those things can be very motivating for a seller. And then that's a great place to step in and say, hey, I have the money you need to do these repairs. I'll stop you from going into foreclosure. I'll stop you from getting in trouble with the city in exchange for fill in the blank.
Now, after reading your book, Bill, there was something a little eye-opening to me. And that was, when I think of creative financing, seller financing, I usually think of those deals more applicable to single family, even very small multifamily, right? You're distressed landlord, you're tired landlord, it's the house on the wrong side of the tracks with the tall grass, right? But you've actually done large multifamily deals with creative financing. So maybe tell us about Absolutely. One of those larger deals.
Yeah, the largest master lease option I did was 108 units. I talk about that in the book. The largest seller financing I did was 152 units, where the seller actually had a little mortgage on the property, and I went out and did a full syndication. So I had a partner in that deal. We went out and we raised 20% down payment from limited partners. We were the general partners. And we took the investor's money, that 20% down payment allowed the seller to pay off their primary debt and therefore turn around and issue financing to us. So my first large seller financing deal, 152 units, and we had seller financing for 2 years with 20% down. After that 2 years, we were able to refinance into a Fannie Mae loan, a long-term 10-year Fannie Mae loan, and been cash flowing ever since. And interesting is as we're doing this recording, I am literally waiting on the closing for that property. We're selling it. I've owned it for almost 10 years. Again, first 2 years for seller financing was an excellent deal. And now we're exiting and at a very profitable level. I'll say that now almost 10 years later. So yeah,
really cool.
Done a lot of big deals, a lot of large stuff. Yeah. Don't think that size of the property has anything to do with it. It absolutely does not. It doesn't matter if it's houses. It doesn't matter what kind of real estate. It doesn't matter if it's storage or hotels or apartments or whatever. It's creativity and using creativity to create value. That's it. You can do this with anything. It can be cars. It can be rocket ships. It doesn't matter. It's nothing to do with real estate. It's business. And that's what creative financing is for. But let me point something out. Creative financing isn't what I don't want anybody to think is that this is a one-stop shop. That, hey, I'm going to go out and only do lease option deals. I'm going to go out and only do seller financing deals. No. That's not how this works. Creative financing is just meant to increase probability. That's it. If you're analyzing deals and you come across a deal and you can go get a loan from the bank and put down 20-25% and get a loan and buy the property, you should. It's when you analyze the deal and that scenario doesn't work. The property won't qualify for the loan, or it's distressed, or whatever the case. That's when you come in with creative financing. So it's just a way to increase the probability. It's extra tools in the toolbox. It's
I was just going to say that.
In the toolbox. That's where I see a lot of people get wrong, get off track with that. And they go around seeking out lease options or seeking out seller financing. And the problem with doing that, it comes off as you can't close. It comes off as you don't have any money. Yeah. It comes off as you may be broke. And so if you're dealing with a savvy seller or a realtor, that may be a turnoff. So you don't ever want to go out and start asking for seller financing or asking for lease options. You only offer it when you realize it's the solution to a problem.
So how do you creatively propose seller financing, let's say, without trying to come off like inexperienced or you're broke or whatever?
Yeah, good question. What you want to do, all right, so I tell this story occasionally, and listeners, you may have heard this one, but this is what I call the ugly baby syndrome. All right. So everybody that has a kid thinks their kid's cute. Right? Everyone loves their baby. Everyone thinks their children's cutest in the world. But there's some ugly people in the world. Somebody was wrong, right? Somebody somewhere was wrong about their kid. Just saying. So I'm sure it's not your child if you're listening, but point being. So this is what I call the ugly baby syndrome, right? You have a seller who has a problem, but they don't know it. And you've got to educate the seller that their kid is not as cute as they think. Because what I've also found is that every seller thinks their real estate is the best real estate in the world. And that's why I'm making the analogy here is that the sellers all believe their real estate's the best. And that's why they want the highest price. And it's amazing. But we all know there's some junk real estate out there. We all know there's some distressed assets, kind of like the ugly babies, right? So your job is to go in and make the seller understand they have a problem, but it's not your problem. See, now there's the key. If I go to you as a seller and I'm basically coming off as I have no money, I have no experience, and I'm broke, then I'm not really creating a problem solving offer. I'm asking for a favor that we do not want to do. So I've got to sit down and say, okay, Jacob, your deal, I love you. It's great. I love the property, love the price, but you know what? Your income isn't quite good enough for that price. I think it is, but you know what? The bank over here, this evil bank, and I always play that good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
I always blame the lender. I'd love to buy the property for this price, but that dang lender, man, they said that the debt service ratio has to be 1.2 or 1.25.
Yeah.
And gosh, I look at your deal and it's 1.1. That's so what do I do? How do I fix it? See what I'm doing here? I'm telling you, hey, you got a problem. Your kid's not as cute as you think, but I'm not doing it in an offensive way. And I'm not doing it in a way that makes me seem like I'm the problem. So I'm saying, all right, so since this property won't qualify for a loan, and by the way, that's not a me problem. That's an every buyer that walks in the door problem. Mm-hmm. The property's income is too low to the purchase price. Hey, I got an idea. What if we did, there's your offer, master lease options, seller financing, whatever you think fixes that seller's interest or problems right there is then when you bring it in. If they have, I can give you a shortcut. If they have a mortgage, can't do seller financing. You can't give interest you don't have. So if people do it, and what they call a subject to or a wrap, and I don't like those deals, but that's basically where you just make the bank payment for the seller and we just don't tell the bank. I don't think that's a good idea. I think when the seller has an underlying mortgage, you do a master lease option, but at the same time, you get permission from the lender to do it so that you don't violate any loan issues. But if the seller has 100% equity, no mortgage, then don't do a lease option, do seller financing. So seller financing is always a stronger position. But yeah, that's kind of roughly how you have to start making those offers. It's what I call the SPY technique, and this is in the book, and it's seller property U. SPY. That's an acronym. And I created that acronym to remind us that we start with the analysis by looking at what the seller wants, what's the seller's problems. Does this offer solve for the seller? Okay, next we look at the property. Okay, is my offer fixing the issues with the property? Lastly, is this offer good for me? Does it solve my problems? What I realized by teaching this for over 10 years now, since the last recession, what I have found is that people are typically unsuccessful with creative financing. It's because they're reversing that model. They're thinking me. What's good for me? Does this offer? I have no money. I have no experience. Is this good for me? Oh yeah, let me look at the property. And then it's almost like an afterthought, this seller, and so that's why I say that's why you got to go seller property U in that order, and you'll increase your offer rate.
And I think in that order, right, you have to really prioritize relationships. And it's not so much the numbers at that point. It's not so much where's the deal at or what are the numbers on it. It's like, first off, let's dig into the kind of interpersonal relationship of that seller. You got to kind of get to know that person, right? And that's a hard thing to do from a shotgun approach where you've got to talk to 100 sellers to make offers on 50 to buy one, right?
That's it. Yeah. I didn't say it was easy. Yeah, it is. And what I have found is that typically when you're just using traditional financing, you will close about 1 in 80 deals that you analyze. 80 deals that hit your desk, you go through the numbers, you crunch the deal. About 1 of those, you're going to get all the way through the loan, all the way through the process with traditional financing. When you add in creative financing, you might be bringing that number up to 5 or 7 out of 80. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like we're every deal is a good deal all of a sudden. That's not how this works. It's just increasing probability. Remember, just because you can get creative financing doesn't mean you should. There are a lot of properties out there that are simply bad deals. They're in bad neighborhoods. They're distressed. They've got infrastructure problems. You know, who knows? In a terrible example, but look at this property that collapsed in Miami. There was no seller financing or lease option that would have ever been a good idea on something that was literally about to fall down and kill everyone. So be careful about the deal. Don't let creative or seller financing get you into a deal you shouldn't be in. So, you know, be careful with that. It still has to be a good deal. Don't force anything.
Yeah, really good points there. You know, like you said, like, you know, it could be the worst property in the world or the best property in the world. And if you don't approach it the right way, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So, well,
Yeah,
let's talk
creative
about
financing makes a good deal better. It does not make bad deals good deals. So be careful with that.
there you go. Let's talk about advantages from both the buyer and the seller real quickly. Let's
Sure.
start with the buyer. Why? I think it's pretty obvious. Like, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is low or no down payment, right? That's a pretty big advantage possibly in using creative financing, but there's others. Talk about from the buyer side, why it might be advantageous to implement this strategy.
Yeah, tax hit number one. So specifically with seller financing, you know, if they have full equity in the deal and they're going to sell, they're going to take a large capital gains hit on the sale. So this is a way that they could create a mortgage, an annuity, basically, and generate a stream of revenue for themselves. So if a seller really doesn't have a great need for the chunk of liquidity that will come from the sale, but they do have a need for the revenue stream that equity created, then seller financing is a great one because they can continue to have a revenue stream and only pay taxes on the gains or the interest without losing a big chunk or having to redeploy all of that capital. And as funny as it sounds, having money can actually be a problem. That's a rich person's problem. I'll be the first to admit. But you know, when someone is all of a sudden sells a property and they're handed millions of dollars, they got to do something with it.
Yeah.
And just sticking it in a checking account's not a great thing to do with a whole lot of cash. It's not really earning any money. So when a seller sells, they typically now have the problem of redeploying that capital. And if that is a number one reason that a lot of times sellers won't sell. They say, sure, if I sell this to you, what am I going to do with the money? You know, I can't turn around and buy anything else. And so this is a solution to that argument. It's like, hey, you don't actually have to sell and redeploy the capital. You'll just create this. That's one answer. Number two, then that's something they can also leave to family members. You know, a lot of people like to talk about legacy wealth and leaving family members, you know, real estate and portfolio and all these sorts of things. But what I've found is that doesn't actually work as well as you might think. Your kids might not necessarily want to be landlords. You did, but maybe they don't. You know, maybe they're not in business. Maybe they're not cut out for that. You know, and so in a lot of cases, it's easier to sort of leave a revenue stream to someone, a note, than the actual property that has to be dealt with and managed. And, you know, tenants and so forth and so on. So those are all reasons that you might want to do it. Tax avoidance, again, burned out, don't want to deal with it anymore. They don't have enough cash to actually do the repairs. That's one tip there. If you can go get seller financing, what I love to do is to try and swap out down payment money with repair money.
Yeah.
Right. So if Jacob, you got a deal and you say, hey, it's $1 million and I need $200,000 down, and I go over there and find $100,000 worth of work to do on the property, I'm going to come back at you and say, hey, listen, I'll give you $100,000 down and I'll do $100,000 worth of work to your property. Worst case scenario, you take the property back. Hey, look, it's in better shape. You know, so that's kind of a way that I like to limit the amount of capital. I don't want to have to put down 200 grand with you and then go find another 100 grand to fix up your property. You know, that's getting heavy. So I always try and swap out repair costs with down payment.
And when you're sitting down with this prospective seller and you're kind of having that ugly baby talk, right? And you're talking about the asset, maybe you bring up these things like, hey, and also, you know, what are you going to do with this cash when you sell? Or do you have any plans?
My favorite
for the
question.
next step, right? So,
hey, you know, I know you must have great plans for all this cash. You must have some great, you know, investments lined up. And I kind of go at it from that perspective because the majority of the time the answer is they don't. And as soon as you start pointing that out, they go, oh yeah, gosh, what am I going to do with all this money? And you go, oh, well, how about, So yeah, it's like that. I always kind of go into that. I go, man, you must be going to Hawaii, right? You must have some huge plans for all this money I'm giving you.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mhm.
Now, how about from the buyer's perspective, Bill? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, one of the main goals of an investor is to put little down payment sometimes, but are there any other advantages that you might see from an investor perspective?
There are. And now we're going into a slightly different subject. Something that I am predicting, and I've mentioned this in the Creative Cash book, and something that I am predicting to occur in the future market is what I'm calling the CapEx tsunami. It's the capital expense tsunami. And what I'm talking about is aging buildings. America is in a new paradigm where if we really stop and look, and I've started to kind of do a study of this, if you really stop and look at the majority of our affordable housing, it's apartments that are what we call organic affordable housing. All right. Affordable housing is technically built. LIHTC, low income housing tax credits. It's built. The government gives you tax credits. You keep the rents low. When a property gets older and it becomes affordable through age, that's what we call organic affordable housing.
Yeah.
And the majority of our affordable housing in America is of the organic category, which really is a polite way of saying old as hell. The majority of our affordable housing in America is old as hell. And so the problem is that these buildings, again, a terrible example, but look at this property in Miami that collapsed. A lot of assets in America are really starting to reach an age of physical obsolescence. The study that I've done is to really stop and look at when did our affordable housing product really start to get built? Late 50s, early 60s is when we really start to see the majority of the large pine frame construction apartments being built. Sort of prior to World War II, prior to baby boomer era, they were still doing brownstones, a lot of brick construction, a lot of the buildings like you see in New York. We didn't see the cardinal construction and pine frame and mass build kind of things until 60s, and then really getting heavy in the 70s, maybe up to the early 80s. Those properties are reaching an age of great risk. You go and buy that old property and you think it's going to cash flow, but then all of a sudden all the plumbing is falling apart or the roofs all have to be replaced. And, there's foundation issues, God forbid. And, and then here comes the city and here comes code enforcement, and they're not asking, they're telling you're going to fix this and this and this and this. That's where creative financing is going to be of great value to the buyers.
Also, exactly.
Help us deal with these older buildings without having to go take on new debt ourselves, which is the risk. And that's what I want everybody to avoid is going and taking on risky mortgages on older, risky properties. That's a mistake. So, be careful with older buildings until we can start getting some creative financing in there. That's going to be the real value for buyers going forward. And there's a lot of products, a lot of apartments in America that fit the description I just gave.
You mentioned earlier in the conversation the term defeasance, also known as prepayment penalty. Describe kind of the risk there and what you see and exactly what that means.
Yeah. So when you go and get agency debt, which is our government sponsored enterprises, which just is a fancy way of saying Fannie and Freddie, right? Mm-hmm. Long story, and you can look this up. I won't bore you too much, but it's called commercial mortgage backed security, or CMBS. Fannie Freddie don't really create mortgages. They buy them, they bundle them up, and then they sell them as shares of a bundle on the back market, right? So you can go and buy a cut of these pile of mortgages, and that's your CMBS. If you pay off a mortgage early, you're taking that mortgage out of that pool and you're shorting the end buyer of those shares. And so Fannie and Freddie say, not a problem. You can pay your mortgage off early. You just need to pay that end user over there the money we guaranteed them because they bought a share of this loan here. So that's where the prepayment penalties come in, and that's what they're for. And so when you go get this 10-year fixed mortgage from Fannie Mae and you pay it off in 2 or 3 years, you're going to have a lot of prepayment. There's different types of prepayment, by the way. There's yield maintenance and defeasance, and there's other ones. But point being, in layman's terms, it's a prepayment penalty. So you've got to really pay attention to your exit strategy. If you went in and you said, hey, this is a fix and flip, I'm going to go in and do heavy value add. We're going to get the rents up. This thing's going to be worth a whole lot more. And then I'm going to turn around and refinance and pull my money out, or I'm going to sell it in 2 or 3 years. And you make the mistake of getting a 10-year fixed Fannie Mae mortgage because you thought the interest rate was really low. You're going to get clobbered when you try and sell that property. You're probably not going to make any money and or not be able to sell because of that big old prepayment penalty. And don't think Fannie or Freddie are your friends. They will not negotiate. They will not let you out of the prepayment penalty. If that asset isn't working and the tenants aren't paying, and all of a sudden it becomes distressed, and you think, well, gosh, I'll just go over to Fannie Mae and get them to drop the prepayment penalty, and then I can sell the property and get out of here. They'll foreclose on you before they allow you out of that prepayment. Let me be real clear on that. So that's where I think a lot of people have gotten into older buildings with long-term fixed debt. And they're gonna have a hard time getting out of that deal here in the next couple of years. It creates a long-term hold, 5-7 years. And if you own a building for 5 or 7 years, that's plenty of time for some capital expenses to
stuff's going to break in there. You're going to have to
replace.
Something's
going to break. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, and now if your property was built in 1962, I guarantee you some stuff's going to break. And if you overpaid for that old building, that's where you're going to get in trouble. And that's where I'm saying, hey, be careful, America. The C space, the affordable housing space, is very inflated right now. The prices are very inflated. The returns are very low, and those buildings are getting old. That's why I wrote the book, and that's why I actually brought the book out now, because I think from today over the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to really see the advent and the use of creative financing. So that's why you want to get it now. You want to study these techniques now. They've not been that prevalent over the last 5 to 7 years. Why? The market's been good. The market's been going up. Everybody can just sell. Going forward, I think you're going to see that shift heavily. Not prices are not going to come down. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be a price crash. It's not that.
So, Bill, what are you doing in your own personal investing business to mitigate these risks? What do you see that you're doing differently to avoid this, CapEx tsunami and this risk?
Flight to quality.
What is it?
Flight to quality. We're moving up the ladder. I'm looking at B pluses and A minuses, and that's really about it.
Okay.
Yep. I will move back to and let me back up. There's absolutely nothing wrong with older buildings. There's nothing wrong with owning C space assets. There's nothing wrong with affordable housing. The only problem is overpaying for it. If you're going to overpay for real estate, at least overpay for something nice. Don't overpay for an old building in a bad neighborhood. That's not going to work out for you. And my favorite saying these days is, hey, if you're looking at those old buildings and it's a 4 cap, it's not a 4 cap, it's a foreclosure. So be careful. You're going to buy these old buildings at a low cap rate or a high price, we'll call it that. It's not going to be good for you.
Bill, there's so much good stuff that you can only condense down from your book in one podcast episode. So, we can't get to everything in this episode, but for people that haven't picked up your book yet, I highly recommend it. It's called Creative Cash. What's the subtitle?
It was the, now I forgot what the subtitle. Creative Cash, the Guide to Match Lease Options and Seller Financing for Multifamily.
Gotcha. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. Well, hey, let's go ahead and wrap up here. I know we're both on a time crunch. We end every episode with a lightning round, just a series of questions we fire at you. Are you up for it?
Let's do it.
The first question is, what was your biggest hurdle getting started investing in real estate? And then what'd you do to overcome that?
Yeah, the fear that was the biggest hurdle, that fear of your first deal, that fear of, it's kind of like going fishing and then you actually get something on the line and you go, oh my gosh, what do I do? I actually got something on the line. It was that fear of someone saying yes. I wasn't scared of somebody saying no. Somebody's scared of saying yes, I'll do the deal. So I just had to take action. You just had to do it. Make offers is probably what I would say do on a regular basis. Don't shoot out a whole bunch of lowball offers, but get in the business of making offers regularly, and that'll help you get over that nervousness. If you were like me and your first deal has kind of got you a little nervous, get out there and start making some offers.
I love it. Bill, do you have a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Oh yeah, I'm a big reader. 2 cups of coffee in the Wall Street Journal every morning.
Okay.
2 cups of coffee in the Wall Street Journal. I recommend it for everybody.
I'm definitely a 2 cups of coffee kind of person. Bill, do you have an online resource you find valuable in your own day-to-day life?
Online resource I find valuable. Honestly, these days, I've actually been on Clubhouse a lot more lately. I'm not really pitching that app particularly, but I like the app. I've been on Clubhouse a lot. That's probably about it. I'm not a huge online person. I have someone that handles a lot of my social media for me. Clubhouse has been good. I don't know. I can't really think of anything one particular.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. How about a book you would recommend to the listeners and why? Obviously, Creative Cash, but outside of it.
Yeah, outside of that, well, here, that's funny you ask it. I did not know he was going to ask that question. So these are actually my two favorite books, The Prince by Machiavelli and Sun Tzu, Art of War. They sit on my desk at all times. I strongly recommend these two books, The Prince by Machiavelli, if you didn't read it in high school, and even if you did, reread it. But reread this book, and instead of thinking about it like he's talking about a nation or a country, think of it in the terms of business. So read this and think about he's talking to a manager, not to a prince or a king.
Okay.
And you have a ton of information. And same thing, Sun Tzu, Art of War, exact same thing. Now there's been a million books written on that, how to use that for business and translations, this, that, and the other. But The Prince, I think, is a little less appreciated book. And Machiavelli, a tremendously unappreciated, misunderstood author in history.
I love it. Bill, when you come to the real estate space from a unique perspective, you've got an awesome approach to it. I love the book. I love what you've done. I love learning from your teachings and everything. If people want to do that and continue to learn more about you, reach out to you, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends. Number one, my email address is bill@gobroadwell.com. Broadwell being BROADWELL. If you're looking to invest with my partners and I, or do business with us, go to broadwellpropertygroup.com, and we have a space up there for investors. All you have to do is log in, put in your information, and we will be in touch with you very shortly about you doing some business with us in the future. And if you're looking for more information at the moment on creative financing, we certainly have the book Creative Cash, and that's on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. And I have a website, creativeapartmentdeals.com. I have a masterclass there if you want to download a little more information, a little more than you get in the book, creativeapartmentdeals.com.
Fantastic, Bill. Hey, as we're wrapping up here, is there any parting piece of advice that you'd like to leave with the audience members? Maybe something I didn't ask you that I should have.
Yeah. I think, all right, I'll leave everybody with this. I'll ask you this question. I believe Einstein was the one that actually made the quote, I believe. But what is the definition of insanity?
Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results.
What's the definition of practice? Are you telling me practice is insane?
I would say practice is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Exactly. So practice is not insane. And I think I believe Einstein is the one that first said that doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result is insane. And I'm saying, no, it's not. It's the definition of how we become successful. So do not think that doing something over and over and over and expecting a different result is insane. It's not. It's business. It's how we get here. So my ultimate point here is be ready to fail, be ready to take some lumps, be ready to get out there and practice. And understand that it takes a while, it takes repetition, it takes failure to ultimately become successful. Don't ever let anybody tell you that practicing is insane. And Einstein was wrong. So I'll leave you with that one.
I love it. Well, commercial airline pilot turned real estate investor, creative seller financing wizard himself, author of Creative Cash, Bill Ham. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Bill.
You've been listening to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast, providing you actionable content to build your real estate empire. Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for personal advice. The opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have a potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom, LLC, exclusively.